Well, welcome, patrons. Thank you so much for being here today. This is my interview series with other creative entrepreneurs. And Stephanie Siuda is the very first person I'm going to be interviewing. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me, Mary.
Yes, so Stephanie is the founder and creative director of Out of Pocket Inc. Right? That's
Yep,
like, okay.
that's it. Yep.
And so we're going to talk more about Out of Pocket. It is a theater production company. So if we can, I'd like to start with you and
Okay.
talk a little bit. Let's just go back in time.
Okay.
And I'd love to just hear about, like, where are you born? Where did you grow up?
Mhm. Yeah,
And yeah.
all that fun stuff. Okay. I was born in Lee, Massachusetts, so the Berkshires. So it's about 4 hours from where I live right now in Rochester. So Lee, Massachusetts, very small town in Massachusetts. It's exit 2 on the Turnpike. So born there. I lived there until my junior year of high school, and then we moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan.
That must have been such an inspiring place to grow up with Tanglewood. And
Oh, yeah, that's where, because Tanglewood was where like our high school graduations were. Both of my brothers, their graduation was there. I did a Tanglewood in the arts called the Darts program one summer. So yeah, it's so much in Massachusetts, culture and art wise. It was great, as well as trees and foliage and mountains and hills. We had all that, of course, too. But
yeah, it's such a beautiful, beautiful
yes,
part of the world.
yes,
And like it being kind of, 2 hours from Boston and then 2 hours from New
yep.
York, right?
Yep. But interestingly enough, the first time I went to New York City was on a band trip from my band in high school, my high school band in Michigan.
Like as a kid, did you always have like an affinity for theater? Like were there any clues that that was kind of your calling early on?
I think I did. I mean, I always loved performing. My mother had me in ballet. I always say I was the chubby ballerina. Like we did Nutcracker, and my cousin was the skinny little reindeer, and I was the clown that rolled out of the drag queen skirt, is what we always said. So ballet only went so many years because I was the chubby ballerina. But ballet and beauty pageants was the other big thing I was involved in as a child. So if you've ever seen Little Miss Sunshine, that was kind of the more beauty pageant I was, because my talent was lip syncing of all things. Um, so dressed up as Madonna, lip syncing like a virgin. I think it may be 6 years old. I was very young, but like I said, when I saw Little Miss Sunshine, I was like, who took my life? All my clothes were made by my grandmother and my mother, so it was great. Looking back on it now, I mean, I still have a lot of those dresses. It means so much of all the kind of creativeness in the family itself that went into putting me in those. But I think between beauty pageants and ballet and some of those activities my mom had me in, I really think that influenced me going on to theater and pursuing this later in life.
Hmm. And then so from Kalamazoo,
Mhm.
you went on to college
Yep.
in
In Galesburg, Illinois. So Knox College, small liberal arts school. So things happen for a reason. I'm a big believer. You know, when we first moved to Kalamazoo, I was, what are you doing to me? But after 2 weeks there, it was meant to be. There was a community theater built onto the high school. I was able to get tech credits through that theater, and that we didn't have that in Massachusetts. We had a small theater in our cafeteria in my Lee school. So I was able to get that from Kalamazoo. And then Knox College, small liberal arts school in Galesburg, Illinois, was a perfect fit because it was a college you didn't get lost in, I guess. If you wanted to do something, you kind of pursued it, you were able to do it. So I went there for 4 years and got my BA. And first show I auditioned for, I got in. Yay, that's great. After that, I wasn't getting in shows. I just wasn't getting cast. So I started volunteering at the costume shop, of all places. And after a semester volunteering there, they hired me. So for the 4 years I worked at Knox, I went to Knox, I worked in the costume shop. So I kind of got some of those skills down. It's a couple summer stocks in my college years. I worked at Barrington Stage Company, so back to the Berkshires for that as a stitcher, and kind of found another trade, as well as my joy with acting and directing and whatnot.
Wow, that's amazing. So what did you do in the costume shop?
Everything from sewing and designing. So it was, like I said, kind of going back to my grandparents and my grandmothers and my mother. They were all seamstresses. Our teacher there, Margot Shively is her name. We called her our fairy godmother. She was great in just kind of helping me to, tone those skills and define what exactly needed to be on stage, whether it was texture or what was needed in the design. And I always tried to find things kind of out of the box when I took on the design pieces. So it wasn't just a plain dress. There was different layers within it and different textures throughout. So it helped, at least at the times I wasn't necessarily getting cast, the costume shop was helping me with my creativity there, helping me with that release. Later on in college, I did do Chicago Arts Program. Was the beginning of my the end of my junior year. So when I came, so what that was spending a semester in Chicago. But yeah, it was another great experience that I was able to, because of Knox, to go to the city and take some more programs with that.
Wow. But so can you, for people who aren't familiar with all the different roles involved in theater, can we kind of go through, like,
Certainly.
what are the roles and responsibilities of an actor, of a writer, of a director? So maybe, I don't know, where should we start?
We'll start with the boring one. We'll start with the producer. How's that? We'll start with the boring one. We'll start with the top and work our way down.
Yeah,
So
I feel like producer, it's like everyone's like, yeah, producer, but it's like,
yeah, no.
really?
The producer is the non-glamorous one. So the producer with Out of Pocket kind of falls in with the artistic director position I do, and that's usually the person that's finding the staff for the show. You're finding the director, you're finding the tech people, the designers. You're not casting it. The director's going to do that part. But you're also the one responsible for, if you don't have a space, finding the space. Sorry, the sun is coming out here and blinding me here. Finding the space in that aspect of things and kind of putting the pieces together. So the producer's kind of the one in charge of the grand picture of things, I guess, as well as funding, figuring out that type of thing. And
is that more
kind of
executive producer in the theater world, or
is that more what was that?
Executive producer is the one responsible for funding?
Yes. Yeah. So, executive producer. In our world, we just have producer, but depending on what level you're in and whatnot, but they're usually the one that has to make sure you have the funding, as well as what's allocated out where. And they're also the ones working with, if you have a technical director, in our case, I'm usually that as well, but they're working with all the directors and designers, making sure everybody's on schedule so that you open on this date. Is this going to be complete? Is this going to be complete? Is this going to be complete? That kind of thing. So that's kind of the start, the producer there.
Okay. Do you play the role of producer, or do you have somebody who work with you?
So for Out of Pocket, I usually produce the shows. It's always fallen that way. It's not that I don't want other people to produce. I would be welcome to that. But it usually just falls that way, just because of kind of where our roles align within it there.
Okay,
so,
great.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the basic idea of a producer, is kind of, it sounds like making it happen.
Yep,
And
making it happen, making sure you have the resources that you have in order to make it happen. Yeah. Director would probably be next. So director, in our case, is usually going to be the one casting the show. So you'll have an audition. The director decides who's going to be what role. They're the ones running the rehearsal and blocking things out. So they're given a script. They decide, okay, they want the actors to cross here. They want this scene to look that way. So they work with the creative team. But director usually has the overall decision in the show of what's going to be. So they have the final decision, I guess. Everybody, in a way, reports up to the director, and the director reports up to the producer, in a way. But that's kind of the director overall is in charge of the process, the creative process there within the show itself.
And in terms of casting, like, how much, like, there's a vision of what they want a person to look like and sound like, and then, like, how much do they end up, like, deviating from that? Like, what is
It really depends on your director, and that's the hard thing in the theater world. And I mean, this was actually something one of those sad things told to me in college. It was especially with women. So it was the whole size thing that came up in college. And I was told at one point, if you wanted to be an actress, you had to gain or lose 50 pounds because there was no in between. You were either at that time, it was the Kathy Bates or the Calista Flockhart. You know, you were either really unhealthy skinny or you were overweight in their terms. So the directors, it really depends on the director. I mean, some directors, they have such an open mind with the characters and they want to see who can do what with them. Versus you have those who have the picturesque image of what they want their picture and portrait to look like. And sometimes they'll look at that first before looking at what the actor is actually bringing into the character.
Right.
Does that answer that?
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah. No, I'm just
the
very
shocking answer to it, the sad answer to it.
sad.
And I feel like our craft has changed a lot over the years. I mean, it still has so much more to go. But I feel especially over the past couple years, it's helped go in more the positive direction. But for years, you know, you look at the movies, you look at the theater, and your ingenue is always your petite little thing. And your funny girl can be heavier, can be different in that aspect of things. So, like I said, I feel like nowadays things have thankfully started to go in more of a direction of the talent versus just the looks of it.
Well, it's like, you know, there's so many layers, right? There's like, what is the story trying to convey? Like, what do you want the audience to feel? And like the thing about performance art is there is a visual component to it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that, but that shouldn't be the only component, right? So
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
that's just interesting. So in terms of directors, they
Mhm.
are casting the show, they're picking out who the actors are, they're there for rehearsals, they're saying you move here at this point. There, what is that called? That's the
The blocking.
blocking, yes. And they report to the producer.
In a way, yep.
Okay.
Yep. In a
All
way,
right.
yep.
So that's director,
That's
everyone.
the director. That's the director. Then you have the stage manager. So they're kind of the other in-charge person, especially once the production begins. I want to say a good director will then turn it over to the stage manager. So once production goes up, stage manager, they are in charge. And in a lot of professional theaters too, once production goes up, the director's done with it. So they'll maybe come here or there, but they're done. Stage manager is then the go-to. So they're the ones in charge of rehearsal, taking down the notes. So what is the blocking? They're the ones taking down exactly what's happening. If an actor has a question later, the stage manager is going to be the ones that has it in their call script. When actors are learning their lines and they call line, the stage manager is going to be the one that's calling that line out to them. So stage manager, I feel like, is a role that is so underappreciated, but theater could not happen without it. And I feel like that's something people sometimes forget. It's the one that it's one of the roles that people don't like to say they know how to do, because the minute they find out you can stage manage, we didn't have a role for you, but can you stage, and it's one of those that we often leave off of our resume if we don't want to stage manage, as sad as it is to say. But it is so needed.
And the timing of it sounds like a lot of pressure, to be there at the end and making
Yep.
sure things are seen.
Yep, and the stage managers through the whole process, and they're the ones too that are calling cues. So you have a show, you need lights up, you need sound up. The stage manager is the one with the script usually calling those cues, telling everybody when to hit the button, especially for bigger groups. Smaller groups like ours, our stage manager is usually the ones doing the light board, doing the soundboard. But especially with your bigger theaters, your stage manager is going to be the one in charge running the whole thing in that aspect of things. Sometimes bigger theaters, there's a technical director, and they're the ones that, so you have your TD, and they're the ones that your tech crew falls under. There, not all theaters have that. Sometimes, once again, our smaller groups, it's all merged together. But usually we'll have production meetings. So our costume designer, our set designer, our director, our stage manager, they all meet together before the rehearsals even start, because before you can start blocking the actors out, you need to know what your set's going to look like. You need to know what your costume piece they're going to be. If somebody's going to be wearing heels the whole show, then they should be put heels from day one so they can get used to walking around in those heels. Same with skirts, that type of thing. But those are some other roles within it, the designers, and depending on which, your sound designers, your light designers. So lights is the one thing that I've always shied at. Like, I've always been lucky to have people running lights. Lights is the one thing I would say shy away from knowing, but I should be more informed on my lights. But your lighting designer, I mean, people don't even think about that. You go to a theater and you see the actors, and that's what you see, but you don't realize that maybe that one hint of red in the light is what's bringing out that scene or bringing out that moment.
Awesome. And then should we talk about actors, like kind of what their responsibilities and what
Yep.
like?
Yep. So of course, getting their lines down, that's always the biggest thing. The earlier, the better. Myself, I'm sometimes late with my lines. I'll get them down in time for when I'm supposed to be off book. But being there, showing up, being prepared for rehearsal. As I was saying too, if certain things need to be done costume wise, wearing if it's not provided for them, finding what's going to be helpful to craft their character. Because the character isn't always who you are. So what exactly is going to help you become that person on stage? So learning their lines, taking their blocking down. We always joke, making sure to use a pencil because you never know what's going to change. But yeah, doing your homework in between rehearsals is one of the biggest things with the actors. So it's not just learning the lines, but it's sitting down and finding the intentions of it. Why is my character doing what they want to do? What are they getting out of it? That type of thing.
Right. So we do have a personal connection that reminds me.
We do indeed.
Stephanie and I have known each other for a while. She's dear friends with my mom, who is a community theater actor in Rochester.
Amazing. Yeah, she's amazing.
So she's been in a few productions with Out of Pocket, and that is how I've come to know Stephanie. And we also do guitar together. I teach Stephanie guitar, so she's an amazing student and has progressed so quickly. But yeah, so actors, just learn your lines. Just learn those
Learn your lines. Get off book. Get off book. Because the minute you get the book out of your hands, the more you can play. So the minute you don't have to rely on a script, the more you can kind of play with movement, play with your other actors in the area you're in.
And
when you could, before social distancing, when you could actually play with other actors, right?
And the more the story becomes alive, and the more that you get to really
exactly
feel off of the other actors' energy. And
yep, exactly.
But let's talk about Out of Pocket. So
okay.
when did it all begin? What's the story?
So 2008. So we're heading into our 13th season next year, I believe, is what we're 13 we're on. I was doing, I don't know if you've ever heard the Avon Walk for breast cancer. They do them all in the big cities. So you walk a marathon the first day and you walk a half a marathon the second day. So I've done it 3 times. It's amazing. I recommend it. But the reason this comes in out of pocket. So in order to do it, you have to raise $1,800, at least at the time. It might be more now. And if you don't raise that, then you have to pay it yourself. But I was out to breakfast with a friend and I'm like, all right, how am I going to raise this money? What kind of fundraisers can I do? And she just kind of brought up of, hey, what about starting a theater of all things? It's your passion. You love doing it. What if you were to start a theater that helped causes like this? So that's kind of how we got Out of Pocket. It's theater with a purpose, what we call. And that's the purpose of it. Is we started it with the purpose to help organizations raise money and or awareness. Because we're such a small group, we don't always raise a lot of funds. We try, but raising awareness and getting information about these organizations out is our other kind of big thing within it. And then calling it Out of Pocket, we just but yeah, we kind of, I don't know how we got out of pocket, because it was out of pocket. It was initially, that's what it was. So it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, it just kind of fit. So
wow. And so you guys, when we are not in the midst of a pandemic, you you have 3 productions a year, is that right?
Yep. Yep. So we have 3 set productions a year. We usually fall, winter, and then spring. And then we also we have Fringe in Rochester, and what we do with that is usually every other year. just because it's so much going from Fringe in September to our October production. It's so much on our creative team. So every other year we'll do Fringe. And then probably 4 or 5 years ago, we started getting asked to do these murder mystery events or even mystery events. So those are kind of some ad hoc things we do. We were reached out to by National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they had heard that we did shows for nonprofits. So they said, hey, would you be able to do this? And we were like, sure. And it worked. So since then, we've been hired on by a couple groups, and we use it as fundraising for the theater itself to do either murder mysteries, or in National Center's case, it was just a mystery because we didn't want to kill anybody. And it's an interactive event where people can figure out who did it, etc., over the night. So, but we do have 3 set productions in the year.
Amazing, amazing. And do you guys do those at a local theater in
Yep.
Rochester?
Yep, we rent the MUC, the Multi-Use Community Culture Center. It's on Atlantic Avenue, and they just celebrated this. This will be their 10th year. So we've been there with them, I believe, 5 or 6 years now. But they're a amazing facility. Doug Rice opened it 10 years ago, and it's a great group, especially for those of us without a home. And we now have a home. We have our 3 set spots every year pretty much with them. But they're a great support to us.
Awesome. And it used to be a church, right?
It was, and I believe it's one of those good stories where sometimes, the churches, they closed down, but I think the congregation outgrew the church is what it was.
But yeah, it's a beautiful space, and great acoustics, I would say.
Yes. And it's not just theater there. There's a dance group there. There's a couple dance groups that do shows, as well as people have gone in there and done music, concerts, etc. So it's a very eclectic group, we like to call it, of muck artists.
So talk a little bit more about theater with a purpose and what you guys do.
Yeah. So as I said, trying to find a way to give back to other organizations, especially smaller groups like ourselves. You have those big groups that have so many funders coming in and a lot of money kind of rolling in the doors kind of thing. So we often try to find smaller groups as well that might benefit most from it. And we also try to match them up with shows when we can, just to see if we can pair things without. But usually I'll reach out to the organization and I'll say, hey, we're putting on this production. This is what's being asked to your group. We'll usually ask if they have a volunteer that can be there at each show. That way they can help talk it up, especially in intermission. We found groups that have volunteers there make more in donations. But basically we put a cup out. So when we ask people during the show, this is the group we're not sponsoring. This is a group we're working with right now. We'll have a table set up for them. We'll have leaflets, information, etc. for them. If you have a couple extra bucks, throw it in the pot, that type of thing. And then whatever they collect, we give to them at the end. So that's how we help either raise funds or, as I said, spread awareness for who they are out there.
And who are some organizations in the past few years you guys have?
Like I said, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was one. National Alliance of Mental Illness. Eden Garden Center, which is actually off of the church that I'm in. There's gardens throughout Rochester helping to bring fresh produce. So we did a show one year where we raised money to make a cookbook for them, I think is what they ended up using it for. So just different organizations in town. Veterans Outreach was one. So just different groups, as I said, just trying to reach out and help spread the word more on them.
Right. And that's such a great platform at someone's going out to see a play and then they also get to hear about this great organization. I mean, it's beautiful, brilliant idea. And I think it's very inspiring for other creatives, even if you are working in a small budget and you don't have, a huge surplus, even just a small percentage going to a cause that's important.
And that's what we find. That's what I said, like a $200 to one of those big corporate nonprofits isn't necessarily going to do much, but if it is a smaller group, $200 could mean a lot. So that's kind of what we
these organizations, they're local and
yeah. Except for, I think Avon Breast Cancer was the only one that was not local, and that was kind of our initial, but everything else is here local within Rochester.
It's amazing. I love that, Stephanie. It's so great. It's very, very inspiring. So you guys are also a 501c3,
We
right?
are, yes. Yes, we are. So it took us
That's quite a
probably
process.
probably 10 years to get there. Because, the thing is, like, those of us who do theater, we know theater. Like, I know how to do a play. I know how to put things on. When it comes to 501c3 legalese, as yeah, it's over my head. So we found through my church, actually, somebody knew a lawyer who we worked with. Thankfully for him, we were able to get our 501c3, which has been outstanding because now we can do things like apply for grants, take donations. People can write that off, that type of thing. So it took us, I think, it didn't take us 10 years to get it. It took me 10 years to get our butts together in order to apply for it. Once we applied for it, it took us maybe a month.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but yeah, so we have our 501c3. It's been great. Very thankful. We have a board now as well. And that's what's needed, because for so many years it was myself and my husband just trying to run this theater, and we have friends helping, but it was always the majority of those finances did fall on us. The whole out of pocket really did, it was true. In this case at 501c3, it's not that much that case anymore. We actually have some funding that we're able to use with things like rights, like rent. So it's been very helpful in that regard.
Yeah,
Yes,
we actually did not talk about
we
writers.
didn't talk about the writer aspect. So all the shows except for the mystery events. The mystery events I usually write, or I'll write with a group. But all the shows we do are professional shows. They're all rights. It's usually $100 per production. So if you do 6 shows, you pay $600 in rights. So people don't always realize that in order to do a production, you have to pay the rights, unless you're doing something like Shakespeare, something that the rights are no longer there for. Um, but yeah, so there are rights with each production. So that's something too we have to file ahead of time to make sure. And sometimes it comes into, even if a show's being done in New York City and we're in New York, sometimes we're not given the rights, even though there's 7-hour difference of New York City from here. But it really, if
Because
the
it's
show
not
is being done,
time or
yeah, if they're being done in the same time in the same area, your rights are sometimes denied. Sometimes shows are pulled because somebody on Broadway is working on doing something with it, or they're rewriting and revamping. But usually my husband Jeff does a lot of the reading of the scripts to help plan the seasons. He usually reads them. He'll give them to me, I'll read them, I'll put in some ideas as well. And that's usually how we go about planning the season for it. But as I said, all the shows are things that have been professionally published with either Samuel French, dramatist, Broadway World, and we take it
right.
from
So
there.
um and that's huge that you guys are doing your due diligence, as a songwriter. It makes a huge difference when people like,
Yep.
I'm registered, and when I see those royalties coming in, like that's my living, and that
Yep.
makes a really huge difference. So you're also contributing to the artistic community in that way as well.
Mhm.
So it's all positive things out of pocket.
Trying
So,
to keep everything in a row.
so, how did you select your board members? How did that come together?
We joked about the 3 W's. What is it? Wealth, work, and wisdom. So, and that kind of came into play in some ways. But mostly it was the people who, I want to say, the people who showed up, but it was all right. This is our plan. Who wants to come play with us? And we
Yeah.
kind of built it from there.
And do you see kind of the change? You were talking about how before you became a 501c3 and you didn't have this board, and it was mainly like your friends helping out, but now you
Hmm.
have people who are actually on the board of directors and they have these positions of responsibility. And how do you notice that change in?
I notice a lot. I mean, I'll say it. I know I'm a control freak. Is what my husband would probably say about me. Not I'm a control freak, but it's one of those, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. And since we have the board, it's easier not just to be the I'll just do it person. We have other people who are willing to step up and do it, and willing to be asked to do it. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen change with it, is just having more hands there to help. So it's not all on 1 or 2 people to get the show done.
And where do you feel now that some of that energy, has been like released from you? Like, where do
Mhm.
feel you're able to put it now? Is it more like in your personal life or like where?
Personal life. I know this pandemic is weird, all this downtime. Yeah, I think a personal life. I mean, my husband and I joke because he's in theater too,
Yeah.
and we joke when, especially now, we joke when we're not in a show of when's your next rehearsal? Like not like we've seen too much of each other, but when do you start rehearsal again? So we always joke of like, hey, we're here a lot together. When are you not going to be here? I think yeah, that definitely it though is kind of helping to balance out and keep kind of the work-life balance within the theater world itself.
Yeah, and you probably come to out of pocket with a more refreshed.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
That's awesome. So what's been the most rewarding part of out of pocket for you? So you guys started in 2008. So in the past 12 years, is there like a moment in your mind where you're like, or a series?
I think the fact that we're still going, I mean, that in itself is that right there is what makes it worth it. Somebody seeing a show and saying, you know what, that was good theater. Because we're a very, bootstrap company. We're on a budget. Yet the shows we produce, people love. And
And what has been kind of the most challenging part out of pocket?
I think marketing and grant writing is the kind of the biggest thing that we, I would say, always fall behind. Like as I said before, we can do theater, but not always good at tooting our own horn kind of thing. So definitely the marketing and grant writing, like people in positions are the people that need to be paid in a company, and we don't always have that funding to do that. So I think that's definitely something a challenge that we have that we definitely need to put more effort in the coming years. We are now able to get grants, but we just need to be able to go out there and apply for them. And
Right.
having somebody with that knowledge is and will be huge. So.
Yeah. But that's great because it sounds like you've been focusing each step of the way on, okay, this is what we need
Yep.
to look at now, and this is what we need to look at now, and you're continuing to grow. So I'm excited to see what lies ahead for you guys.
Ditto.
You're like,
Me too.
You also work a job, like a 9-to-5 job.
I do corporate. We'll just call it corporate America. Is what I call it. Yeah, the 9 to 5. In my case, it's a 7 to 4. I'm going on 17 years there now, and yeah, it was a 1-year plan. I was going to work there 1 year and move to New York City, so that was a 1-year plan. Oops. But it's great. It's great. It took a couple years to really kind of get into the groove I needed there. My current role, I'm a program manager. I love it. I love the people. I love the programs I manage. I think the biggest thing is that I love about my job is that I'm usually available nights. I'm usually available weekends. So you don't always have that when it gets to restaurants and retail. My nights are free. So I get done at 4 or 5 at night. I can rehearse at night. I can be in a show on the weekend without worrying about being called in. But I feel like from the theater world, I bring in, because I was a trainer for years where I am right now, and I use that a lot in the position I have right now. And I feel like the theater world has really helped with that training, helped with bringing things out of the box when I'm in a meeting. Well, why don't we try it this way instead? It might not be the corporate way, but let's just play with that idea, because adults are just kids in big bodies. So like I said, definitely skills there I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. And yeah, it just fits right now. It fits well. And I'm lucky I am able to, and my current boss especially, I'm able to do the work-life balance, that I'm able to balance both of the careers that I have within it.
Yeah, and I think there's always something you can take from your day job. I worked at Apple I don't work there anymore, so I can say it. But I worked there for a few years in New York City, and there was one thing they always encourage us to set the right expectation with our customers. And that's something I've always taken with me, like with my students, or really like with clients for weddings where I'm singing. It's like, I really try to make sure that is like that communication is very clear from the beginning. And I think it makes for better relationships,
Yep.
and that was something I learned at my corporate job.
See? Everything is a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
It's always a learning opportunity.
So what does the word creativity mean to you?
Hmm.
You know,
What it means to me is just, I would say, it sounds hokey maybe, but I always think of kind of taking your imagination to places it can go and then trying to take it even further.
oh,
So how far can I go, and then where can I even push it even further? And the way I always tell people the way I could tell when I'm being creative is because time doesn't matter. So I look back at the days when I'd work in the costume shop in my college, and it was in the basement. There was no windows. So you'd be in there and you didn't realize the whole day or the whole night had gone by. I do cooking for my church. That's another thing. I'll go in and I'll cook all day and I won't realize that it's already this time. So things like that, when I'm in my kind of creative zone, time stands still, but time doesn't exist, I think, for me. And that's, but really letting your imagination just soar and see where it can take you is kind of what I find in creativity.
yeah. I think it accesses, like I've studied the brain and like creativity. Like
Mhm.
I've really just been into that the past few years, but it's like accessing a different part of our brain
Mhm.
that allows us to be
Mhm.
in this kind of peaceful state.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so what role does creativity play in your life? Like in your daily life?
Mhm. As I said a second ago, kind of in that corporate America mind frame of things, the last position I had, it was I played with videos, things they hadn't really done in that group of how can we, it was products we were trying to push out for people to sell. So,
Mm,
okay, what creative ways can we spark in showing them versus just telling them? What can we play with image wise, with sound wise, with music, etc., to kind of make things pop more? So just trying to find those out of the box thoughts. I'm very kinesthetic. I'm one that if I can work it and do it with my hands, I'm going to learn it better than reading it. So trying to play to those people as well as those who just read it and take that information in.
wow. Yeah, I love that. It sounds like it gives you freedom to play.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Like you've played so many different roles in the theater world, but it's like you really bring that into your day job too. Like
Mhm.
where, it seems like you're very comfortable just in that play state. Like, let's just try this, and I don't think
And I've been very blessed. My current boss and the boss I had for the past, 3 years, they have both been very open to kind of my, I want to say my whimsical creative ways. And if you don't have somebody like that in your life, I guess seeking out and finding, I know it's not always easy, but that's something definitely being able to make that for yourself, I feel is huge.
yeah, I love that because it doesn't feel as like based on the result as more as like, let's just try this and see what happens, and if it
Yep.
works, let's
Yep.
do it again. And if it's
Continue,
not,
continually growing. And that's how we joked before about learning, but that's how you learn. If it didn't work, okay, it didn't work. What else can we do to make it work or to make it better?
um, so um, what do you think the value theater brings to a community? What
Mhm.
service do you think theater provides for people?
I really think I think it's both a connection and a release within both parties, those on stage, those off stage, as well as the audience. So I really feel whenever I go to the theater, I'm able to usually, depending, able to kind of release away from whatever stress I had that day, release away from kind of whatever worries were out there, and just kind of be captured and pulled into it. And I feel like on stage as well, whenever I'm performing, I get the same thing. People have to remember that an actor can't survive without an audience, vice versa. I feel like, and especially now that we're not able to go out, I saw somebody expressed it best the other day that the artists are the ones right now putting their work out there virtually. They're the ones out there singing songs, acting. My husband's in an event tonight on Zoom. They're doing an improv event. So they're the ones sharing their work because I feel like that's what people need,
Mhm.
um, to survive, to kind of make things better. I'm kind of rambling with this, but that's kind of what I really feel theater overall kind of is, that kind of connection and release from the day to day and within each other.
Yeah, like a connection to feeling and then a release of just, getting your mind off whatever the daily stressors.
Hmm.
Yeah, here's to online events.
I know.
So first is, how can people stay in touch with you, or how can we
Mhm.
support Out of Pocket?
Yep. Stay in touch. Follow us on Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Instagram. We have all those accounts. We have a website, outofpocketinc.com. So those are kind of the best ways to kind of stay in touch of where we are. Anytime we do fundraisers, anytime we do events like we were just talking about, we're going to post them on there. We're working on what our next fundraiser are going to be. I mean, the biggest thing is, as I said, even beyond donating to a theater, attendance is huge.
Um, but yeah, this was so fun.
Thank you for having me. This was great. A lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Out of Pocket, Stephanie Siuda, thank you so, so much for being here. This was amazing.
Thank
And
you, Mary, for having me. It was
okay.
a lot of fun. Always a good time.
Yeah. Be safe, everyone. Take care.
You too.